I still remember the moment I realized some childhood memories were not just fragments of imagination, they were warnings. It was a late summer evening, the kind where the sun barely touches the horizon, leaving long shadows that seemed to move on their own. I was sitting on my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. And then I remembered. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a like, and leave a comment. Watch until the very end because the last memory will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. I grew up in a small, quiet town where nothing much ever happened. At least, that's what I thought. The first memory came from when I was about 7 years old. I was playing in my backyard, a modest patch of grass surrounded by a tall wooden fence that rattled whenever the wind blew. I loved pretending I was an explorer, venturing into unknown territories. That day, I had dug a small hole near the old oak tree at the far end of the yard. My imagination ran wild. I was certain I had discovered an ancient artifact, something that would make me famous. But then I heard the whisper. It was soft, almost imperceptible, carried with the breeze. Don't go near the fence. I froze. At first, I thought it was my imagination. 7-year-olds have vivid imaginations, right? Yet the whisper came again, clearer this time, as if someone were kneeling right beside me. My heart started racing. The backyard was empty. Or so it's... Primera inside, slamming the door behind me, and tried to shake it off. My parents were in the kitchen, oblivious to my sudden panic. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside the window, felt like a warning. I buried the memory deep inside me, writing it off as childish fear. The second memory wasn't as vague. It happened 2 years later. When I was 9, I had started school and developed a habit of walking home alone from the bus stop. Our route was lined with thick hedges and narrow alleys that twisted like a maze. One day, as I was walking, I noticed a man standing behind a fence, just beyond the hedges. He was tall, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't move, but I felt his gaze pinning me in place. I quickened my pace, my small legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. When I glanced back, he was gone, but the unease lingered for weeks. I told my parents about it once. They laughed, said I was imagining things. But every time I passed that alley, I could feel the echo of his presence. That whisper from the backyard years ago came back in my mind. Maybe I wasn't imagining it at all. The third memory is the one that truly broke me. Primera is 11. My family had just moved into an older house, a Victorian-style structure with creaking floors and dark corners. There was an attic that my parents had forbidden me to enter. Naturally, that only made me more curious. I remember the day I finally climbed the narrow staircase, the wood groaning under my weight, dust swirling in the dim beam of my flashlight. Inside the attic, the air was thick and musty, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Boxers were stacked haphazardly, and old furniture was covered with yellowing sheets. And then I saw into a small wooden box, carved with intricate symbols I didn't recognize. The moment my fingers touched it, he felt a jolt like an electric shock running up my arm. Primera pulled back, heart hammering, and then I heard it again, the whisper, faint but unmistakable. Don't open it, leave it alone. I ran downstairs, my hands shaking, but the warning followed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Shadows moved along the walls, and every creak made me jump. I tried to tell my parents again, but this time they were serious. They told me some things are better left alone. I didn't understand why, but the fear was contagious. That was the first time I felt that the memories I had were more than imaginations, they were premonitions. Over the years, I tried to dismiss these moments. I buried myself in school, friends, and eventually work. But the memories didn't fade. They waited, lying in the corners of my mind, resurfacing in moments of quiet when I was alone. I had no proof, no evidence that these were real, but I could feel their weight, the unease they carried. And now, as I sit here recounting them, I realize how many of the small, unsettling moments in my childhood were actually warnings. Warnings I didn't understand until much later. I remember the way the wind would whistle through the fence in my backyard, the cold brush of unseen fingers on my arm at the alley, and the smell of dust and decay in the attic. Each sensation was distinct, visceral, and yet I had convinced myself they were figments of a childish mind. But the truth has a way of catching up. It always does. Even now, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, feeling the same creeping dread I felt as a child. My parents, my friends, even strangers, none of them could see what I saw, feel what I felt. And yet, looking back, I know without a doubt that those memories were real. Real enough to haunt me decades later. Real enough to remind me that the world is far stranger, far darker, than we allow ourselves to believe. The first block ends here, but the shadows are only beginning to take shape. The memories that seemed harmless or merely scary in a child's mind were just the opening act. What comes next is where the real terror begins. The memories didn't just fade into the background as I grew older, they followed me, lurking in corners I didn't expect. By the time I was 16, the whispers had grown more persistent, more insistent, as if the shadows themselves were trying to reach me. I had started noticing things I couldn't explain. Doors left slightly ajar. When I was sure, I declosed them. Faint footsteps echoing in empty hallways, and sometimes, just sometimes, the faint outline of a figure at the edge of my vision. I would blink and it would be gone. It started with the backyard. One warm afternoon, I decided to revisit my old childhood home. The backyard hadn't changed much, the wooden fence still rattling in the breeze, the old oak tree standing like a sentinel over the plot of land. As I stepped closer to where I had dug that small hole years ago, I felt the same prickling sensation along my spine. The whisper carried on the wind. Don't go near the fence." My heart pounded in my chest. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was absurd. I was 17 now, not a child, yet the hairs on my arms stood on end. I knelt near the ground, brushing away leaves and debris, and for a moment, I thought I saw something glinting in the dirt. My fingers trembled as I reached down, and then I froze. The whisper came again, closer this time, urgent. "Stop, leave it alone." The voice wasn't soft any. More it had weight, a presence. I recoiled, almost stumbling backward, and scrambled to my feet. Something about that backyard had changed, though I couldn't put my finger on it. The air felt thicker, heavier, and for the first time, I truly understood the fear I had felt as a child. But it wasn't just the backyard. The alley from my school days haunted me too. I had to walk past it every morning on my way to the bus stop. The man was back. I saw him one early morning, his tall frame emerging from the shadows, the brim of his hat hiding his face. My legs locked. My mind screamed to turn and run, but I couldn't move. He didn't speak, didn't gesture. He just stood there, and the air around him seemed to hum with oppressive energy. My chest tightened, and a wave of nausea swept over me. Then, just as suddenly, he was gone. No footprints, no trace, but I knew he had been there. By the time I turned 18, the attic memory had started to consume me. I had never returned to that attic since I was 11. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see that wooden box, those intricate symbols, and feel the electric shock running up my arm when I had touched it. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that it had all been a childhood fantasy. But one night, alone in my apartment, I heard the sound soft, deliberate scratching coming from above. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a floorboard settling. It was something moving up there, something circling, waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go back. The next day, I returned to my family's old house, now empty and for sale. The keys felt heavy in my hand as I inserted them into the lock, each click echoing like a drumbeat in the empty hallway. I climbed the stairs slowly, dreading the moment I would push open the attic door. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to grip the handle. Inside, the air was worse than I remembered, stale, suffocating, and tinged with a faint metallic scent that made my stomach churn. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight, but my eyes were drawn immediately to the box. It sat in the same spot, as if waiting for me. The symbols seemed sharper now, almost alive, their curves and lines writhing faintly in the dim light. I stepped closer, my every instinct screaming to leave. But I couldn't. I reached for its end. The whisper came again, louder than ever. "Don't touch it." I froze, my hand hovering above the lid. My skin prickled, my ears rang, and the shadows in the attic seemed to bend toward me. I could feel something pressing against the edge of my mind, trying to push me away, to warn me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. Then, in a split second, the box shifted slightly as if something inside it had moved. My heart leapt into my throat, and I stumbled back, almost knocking over a stack of boxers. That night, sleep didn't come. I sat in the darkened living room, my flashlight on the floor, illuminating the empty attic from below. And then I heard it, whispering. Not one voice, but several, overlapping, chaotic, and almost pleading. "Leave. Stop. Run. Don't." I covered my ears, but the sound was inside my skull, echoing in every corner of my mind. I felt like I was drowning in it. The next morning, I returned to my own apartment, desperate for normalcy, but the sense of being watched followed me. Shadows lingered where they shouldn't. Reflections moved when I didn't, and I began to notice marks on my wall scratches that hadn't been there before, forming shapes that almost looked like letters, though I couldn't read them. The childhood memories I had once dismissed as imagination were no longer memories. They were warnings, and I was beginning to understand why. Something had been following me all my life, connected to those moments I had long buried. Each memory, each whisper, was a breadcrumb, guiding me toward something I didn't want to confront. And the closer I got to understanding it, the more intense the presence became. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't run. And deep down, I knew that what had begun in the innocence of my childhood wasn't over it. Had been waiting, patient, for me to grow up, to come back, to see it for what it really was. By the time I pieced these events together, the memories had taken on a new clarity. The backyard, the alley, the attic, they weren't random. They were connected, like points in a web, threads that led to a center I wasn't sure I wanted to find. And yet, the compulsion to confront it, to see it fully, was stronger than any fear. Because somewhere inside me, I knew that if I didn't face it, it would continue to haunt me, creeping into my dreams, whispering at the edges of my mind, until I could no longer distinguish reality from memory. It was a rainy evening when I finally decided to confront the attic one last time. The sky was an endless sheet of gray, and each flash of lightning illuminated the empty streets, like a camera shutter, capturing fleeting moments of dread. I had convinced myself that if I could face the memories fully, maybe, just maybe, I could put them to rest. But deep down, I already knew that I was walking straight into the heart of whatever had haunted me for more than a decade. The house was silent when I arrived, every step on the porch echoing like a drumbeat in the darkness. I unlocked the door, and the familiar smell of dust and old wood hit me immediately. My flashlight barely cut through the gloom, illuminating walls that seemed to close in with every step. The staircase groaned under my weight, each step a reminder that the attic was waiting, patient and unmoving, like a predator stalking prey. I climbed slowly, gripping the railing with white-knuckled hands. At the top, the attic door loomed, as if daring me to cross the threshold. I hesitated, taking a deep breath, and then pushed it open. The air inside was thick, heavier than the world below. Dust floated lazily in the flashlight beam, but my eyes were drawn immediately to the wooden box. It sat exactly where I remembered, carved symbols writhing faintly, almost as if they were alive. My pulse quickened, and the whisper came again. "You shouldn't be here." I forced myself to step closer. My fingers hovered over the lid, trembling. The symbols seemed to pulse with a life of their own, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Ten primera sa, doble treat reflection," in the glass of an old mirror leaning against the wall. Behind me, a shadow moved. Not the shadow of myself, but something taller, darker, stretching impossibly toward the ceiling. My breath caught in my throat. He spun around, but nothing was there. The reflection remained, the shadow still shifting. The whispering grew louder, overlapping, chaotic, urgent. Stop. Leave. Don't open! Run. My mind screamed to obey, to flee. But curiosity and a sense of inevitability rooted me to the spot. I had come too far to turn back now. My fingers brushed the edge of the box, and in an instant, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on the wooden floorboards, and my breath came out in ragged clouds. The attic seemed to contract around me, shadows crawling along the walls like living things. Then I heard a child's voice, small, distant, and filled with despair. You shouldn't have come back. My blood ran cold. The voice was mine, but younger. 7 years old, 9 years old, 11. All of them, all my past selves, trapped inside this presence, trapped inside the memories that I had ignored for so long. The whispers became screams, echoing in my skull, overlapping in a crescendo of fear that made the room spin. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, and the box tilted slightly, revealing a small, black void inside. My reflection in the mirror showed more than my own turret showed the shadows of my childhood memories, pressed against the glass, trying to reach me. I realized then, with a sinking certainty, that the memories had never been safe, never been distant. They had been alive, sentient, waiting for me to return so they could reveal their truth. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring into the blackness of the box. Time seemed meaningless. The whispers and voices merged into a single entity, a presence that pressed against every nerve in my body. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, I felt something brush against my hand. Something cold, wet, and undeniably real. I pulled back sharply, my heart hammering, and the whispers fell silent. For a moment, there was only the sound of my ragged breathing, distant thunder. Then I heard a faint, almost tender voice. Now you see. I looked around, but the shadow was gone. The box remained, inert and deceptively harmless. But I knew better. I had seen behind the veil, glimpsed the reality my childhood had tried to warn me about. I left the attic that night, never touching the box again. But the experience changed me. I could feel the memories lingering, a presence just beyond perception, reminding me that the past is never really gone. The backyard, the alley, the attic, they had been markers, warnings, pieces of a puzzle I had nearly failed to complete. And now, having confronted them, I understood that the world is far stranger than I had ever imagined. That the memories we bury often contain truths we are not ready to face, waiting for the moment when we can no longer ignore them. Even now, decades later, I sometimes feel the whispers when I'm alone, a faint brush of air on my arm, a shadow at the edge of my vision, a sound in an empty hallway. I know they are reminders, keeping me aware that what we dismiss as imagination is often far more real and far more dangerous than we allow ourselves to believe. I cannot explain why these childhood memories were real, or why they connected in this way, but I know they were. And I know that anyone who experiences such moments should listen, pay attention, and never dismiss the warnings. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this. Our memories are more than just snapshots of the past day. They're threads connecting us to things we do not yet understand. And sometimes, those threads lead to places we are not ready to go. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true horror stories like this, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and give this video a like. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced something that seemed impossible? Something that made you question your own memories? Share your experiences, and let's explore these terrifying truths together. Remember, the world is full of things we cannot explain, and sometimes they are closer than we think.